Oh, how y'all doing? This is CS with DWP, and this is Warframe Wiki Wednesday. Happens once a week, and this week we're going to be talking about status effects, aka status procs, rather than status damage. And I'll explain the difference between the two. Um, so let's start with the difference between the two. So as you can see, we have the Super Vandal, and on this I only have two mods: Serration and Split Chamber. And as you can see, it has impact, puncture, and slash. Basically, you have the status type, which is like the damage type. So you have impact, damage, puncture, damage, slash, damage. And then you have the status effect, aka the proc, which is a program random occurrence, which impact has its status effect, puncture has its status effect, and then slash has its status effect, which is separate from the actual which is it's a totally different thing, right? So let's go ahead and get into it. So status effect, or commonly called a proc, is an additional effect which may be triggered at random by a hit from a weapon or Warframe ability. Status chance is a probability that a hit will inflict a status effect. The base duration of the proc will depend on its type and whether the target or an enemy, whether the target is an enemy or another channel. Warframe abilities usually have a high chance to proc, or in some cases 100% chance to inflict their status effect, like Frost Ice Wave or Avalanche, so on and so forth. Each damage type is associated with a status effect. Okay, weapons that deal multiple damage types will have a separate chance to inflict its associated status effect on the target, and only one damage type can proc per hit. See below for information, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So, for example, and I'm reading the for example part, a weapon such as an unmodified static core deals solely radiation damage. In addition to its damage, the static core also has a 28% status chance on each shot to cause a proc. On a successful proc, the enemy will receive radiation status effect, right? So without going too deep, actually, let me read this part too. So enemies also possess the ability to inflict status effects on the Nintendo. For example, the Grenier's Scorch has a chance to inflict the ignited status effect with heat from its Ignis. Similarly, enemies are also able to inflict physical procs such as bleeding, which is associated with slash, directly to the player's health, which basically bypasses the armor, at least for now, or bypasses shields, at least for now. We're not going to get too far into scaling because I don't want to make this too long. But if you do have a question about scaling, basically it says if the initial hit is affected by the following, the resulting damage dealing effect will also benefit accordingly. Damage buffs, so on and so forth, body part multipliers, faction, combo, and all that kind of stuff, right? So all that is considered when inflicting particular procs. For more information, go ahead and go ahead and check out the wiki. Just type in status effect Warframe Wiki and it'll pull right up. Let's get into what they actually do though. So I'm going to go through effectively the IPS or physical ones. And the first is going to be impact, which causes a stagger, which is universal. It causes a target to flinch and stagger movement for 1 second. So this is when you see, let me see if I have an impact weapon, which I should, which is the boar, I believe. Yeah, the boar is impact. So, all right, cool. So I'm going to just put more impact on it, which is full contact, just to make sure that we hit with impact, right? And then I'm going to pull up an enemy, pause the AI, and let's pull up the heavy gunner. So this is impact. That little stagger right there, that's impact, right? It's actually really nice to use, good for CC, so on and so forth. Now, puncture, on the other hand, is not a CC, but what it does is it reduces any damage. Basically, what puncture does, it reduces any damage dealt to 70% for 6 seconds. So for the longest time, I actually thought it was 50%, but what it does is it reduces it by 30%, long story short. So instead of the damage being dealt, let's say I was hitting for 100, right? I would actually hit for, all right, let me see if I got this right. So reduces damage dealt. Oh, gotcha. Puncture weakens the enemy. Used to deal with armor, but I guess not. So I guess if I hit with puncture, then their damage is reduced by 70%. It's a little odd, but that's okay. Bleed, we all know what bleed is. It deals 245% of the base or true damage over 6 seconds. This is why you see certain slash procs, for example, like I can hit for that much, right? Which is 1600, so on and so forth. But if I heavy attack, right, now we're looking at 10,000, 8,000, so on and so forth. So it's going to hit for much more with the slash proc itself. Then you have impair. It restricts the target's movement for 2 seconds. I'm not exactly sure what impair is, but I'm assuming it's that, like a sleep or something like that. That's just what I'm assuming. So true, it has no status effect because it's just true damage. And then you have lifted. Now lifted, we all know what lifted is. Lifted is, of course, when the enemy is in the air. Now I can't do it without killing this enemy, but if you lift the enemy with like a melee, let's say I had the Thibodeau and I was able to lift the enemy, that actually counts as a status effect as well. Now, I think I mentioned this in a few videos ago, but I was talking about condition overload. And I was trying to explain how condition overload had 17 status procs that you can get now. But then the weird thing was you only had, what was it? It was 3, 4, and 6, which is you only had 13 technically that you could put on the enemy. So where's these other 4 coming from? Well, lifted is one of them, right? So let's move on. So we got our base ones, or our base 6. Oh, never mind. So it's actually more than that. Nice. So 15, I guess. So anyway, we have ignite, which is heat. This deals 350 base heat damage over 6 seconds while causing the target to panic for 4 seconds and stripping up to 50% armor. This can be seen with the Ignis Wraith. I'm pretty sure we all know what heat looks like. They basically catch on fire and they're kind of freaking out like, I'm on fire. And this is going to happen for 4 seconds. Keep in mind that heat takes 2 seconds before their armor actually gets to 50%. I believe it goes down. It goes in increments of like half a second, but after 2 seconds, it'll go down to 50. It'll be at 50%, and it'll sit there for roughly 2 seconds, and then it'll just scale back up. What is it? As far as hitting a player, it's pretty much the same thing, but of course that you're not panicking, right? You don't get the CC out of it. For cold, you get a freezing effect, which reduces movement speed, fire rate, and attack speed by 50% for 6 seconds. So instead of reducing armor, you reduce their speed when you use cold. For electricity, and I believe this one can chain actually too. So this one deals 50% of the base electricity damage to enemies within 3 meters of the target and stuns them for 3 seconds. This is more notably on Bolt, but I'm gonna grab Bolt. And if I'm not mistaken, it is his. They really gotta fix that bug. Anyway, this guy right here, Shock Trooper. Yep. So this one right here. So this is gonna deal just a base electricity proc. It's not gonna be any duration based proc or nothing like that. So that's what electricity looks like, and it's going to deal 50% of the base electricity damage, 50% of whatever your base electricity is. So if you have 1,000, it'll hit for 500. Sorry about that. Stun for 3 seconds. For poison, this deals 450% of the base toxin damage over 8 seconds. Now this is over 8 seconds. So I could show you this with the pox, but that's more gas. I'll get into gas in a second, but with toxin, I think I kind of really just want to tell you, consider it a dot. And with toxin, it's kind of similar how heat does dots over time. But in the case of heat, it reduces armor. and Toxin does not, but it does 450 base Toxin, whereas Heat does 350 base Heat. The notable difference between the two, though, is that Heat does not go through armor or shields, but Toxin goes through shields. It doesn't go through armor, but it does go through shields. Just keep that in mind. And then we have, I guess, void damage, which is this guy, right? Now, what's interesting about this is that if you are familiar with mag, right? Well, I guess I'll just show you. So if I reload this enemy, what void damage actually does, it puts a little mag bubble on the enemy. So if I happen to not have viral on this as well, but hopefully I get a void bubble. There we go. And if I shoot at the end of this bubble, it's effectively a little mag bubble, right? So I can shoot that, and the bullets are going to actually hit the enemy. I'm not sure if anybody really knew that, but it's nice to know. To be honest with you, I didn't even really know that. I knew it, but I kind of didn't know it. I knew it from Eidolon hunts. But yeah, it creates a 2.5 meter field radius, which attracts projectiles for 3 seconds. It's pretty nice. Then you have your combined elementals. These are things like blast, corrosive, gas. Let's dig into these because these are the more powerful ones. Personal opinion, but they've always been way more powerful than everything else in the game. Now we have blast, which all it does is it creates a 5 meter radius knockdown, right? So if I hit something with blast, boom, and this person gets hit with that proc, bam, people around them are gonna fall as well. You have corrosive, which, now here's the thing about corrosive and why it was so powerful. It reduces the current armor by 25% permanently. So if you have 100 armor, bam, I reduce it by 25%. Bam, I reduce it by another 25%. Bam, but it goes down based on its current armor value. When I had popped it in the calculator, and all you do is you take 100, aka 100%, and you multiply it times 0.25, and you do this over and over again until you get to about 1%. Right around there, it took me about 15 times doing that to get to about 1%. That's why I keep saying 15 procs to get to 1%. To get to 0%, now it depends on the level of the armor when it comes to a complete armor strip. If they have 1,000 armor, it's going to take much more procs, but effectively they still have 1% armor. You know what I mean? And it's still kind of a big deal. Not going to really be a big deal anymore because this 150 is going to have the same armor as 100, but that's another discussion. Let's move on. Oh, and in regards to players, it's going to only reduces the armor by 25% for 8 seconds, but you can't strip a player's armor if you're ever in PvP. For gas, what gas does is gas deals toxin. Now, there is no proc that does gas damage, right? Instead, what this does is it creates a 3 meter radius effect, which deals 450 base toxin over 8 seconds to the target. So all it does is it creates a gas cloud. It's basically take the toxin proc that does, toxin over time and make a cloud out of it. And anything that walks into that cloud will be affected by this gas proc. The best example I can give you is the infested osprey. Where's my Procs at? Please say this has toxin. It does not have toxin. Let's pick one with toxin. There we go. All right, cool. So the infested osprey, that one's a good example of it. I'm not going to pull it out because we all know what it is, but you know how it spits out a cloud and that thing just starts doing incredible amounts of damage? That's basically what it is, but bam, and you have a little cloud, and that cloud is going to inflict toxin on the enemy. Now, it's not necessarily that the cloud is doing the damage. As you can see, it's still ticking. It's just the fact that it applies a toxin proc. Keep in mind, these dots are affected by status duration. I thought I'd just throw that out there real quick. Magnetic. Magnetic is purely for shields. So it reduces the maximum and current shields by 75% for 4 seconds. Keep in mind, this does not stack, right? Now, when it comes to players, it reduces the maximum recurrent shields by 75% and drains 50 energy per second and scrambles the interface for 4 seconds. So this is why when you're out fighting your Eidolons, right, if you get hit by a magnetic proc, it's going to reduce your shield. You notice your shields get drastically reduced, right? And also you start losing your energy. This is why you'll see a lot of people, at least in the way it currently is, they'll stack nullifiers. I'm assuming they're going to, after the update, this should have 100% at R5. If you're watching this in the future, go ahead and make sure you have 100% R5. But that is effectively what magnetic does. Key thing with magnetic, and this has been this way and it will always be this way, is that Corpus is always going to be the ones you're going to be doing this to. Not only are their shields, not only does their shields get, they take 75% more damage to the actual shield, but it's also doing that as well. It's also going to reduce the maximum current shields by 75% for 4 seconds. So I'll get into this little graphic, the little graphics you're seeing. I'll get into those a little bit later because that does tie into this. With radiation, it causes confusion, and what happens is it attacks any of the closest enemies and will be attacked in return for 12 seconds. So if I hit this enemy with you guys know what radiation is. It's basically like if I hit this enemy with radiation and it's next to somebody else, they're going to shoot at each other. That's just the way it goes, right? When you're attacking a player, on the other hand, it reduces the fire and accuracy, and you're able to damage and be damaged by allies for 4 seconds. So the best way I can explain it for players is if you're on, let's say, Jupiter, right, and you run through a room and you get the radiation proc, then what happens is your accuracy on hit scan weapons, they go down, and on any other weapon where, like, let's say it's a Procs, it's not going to go straight. It might go off to the side or something a little bit, right? You'll just basically be getting spread applied to your weapon. But not only that, it turns on friendly fire for 4 seconds, right? So just get away from your allies or only shoot, because if you melee and you hit your ally, that melee is going to do way more damage than you can. That's basically radiation. Then we have viral, which is virus, and this is pretty straightforward. It cuts the health in half effectively for 6 seconds. This is also why I say it's very important that if you're going to use viral, make sure you can actually obliterate that enemy within 6 seconds, because if you don't, then the health it just takes the damage that you did, resets their health back to 100%, and then applies the damage that you did. So if they have 1,000 health, you did 450 health, it's going to reset their health back up to like 550 because you only did 550. You see what I'm saying? So it's, but you got to kill them in 6 seconds, basically. Status chance. Status chance can be a key factor. I can kind of just explain status chance. So I'm not going to get into the logistics of it with shotguns, so on and so forth, but basically status chance is effectively your chance to actually hit the enemy with that status effect. So if I hit an enemy with the pox, there's a high likelihood that the impact of the pox is going to do toxin damage. How to mod, I could probably do a separate video on that, but I'll give you the gist of it. If a proc has an elemental dot or a damage type dot, let's say heat, let's say toxin, I'll take heat, toxin, and slash. The more of that damage type you have on the weapon, the stronger the proc is going to be, right? So if you have, let's just say, for example, I have gas, right? And instead of pathogen rounds, I have heated charge, right? It's still going to do the same damage per se, right? But the actual toxin itself is going to be weaker. Let me show this off real quick. Yeah, I know it switched to gas, but gas does toxin. Besides, I'm not going to hit the enemy with it. So if I come over here and I throw this, right? My toxin procs are 3 and 2, right? Just a bunch of 3s and 2s, which is fine and dandy, right? But if I switch out this with pathogen rounds, right? The toxin from the gas proc is going to be a lot stronger, or it should be stronger. Yep, as you can see, we have 5 and 9, right? So So basically, the same thing applies to heat. Same thing applies to slash. Slash is kind of different, but it does apply to slash. Just keep that in mind. So if you want a lot of heat damage or heat dots, put more heat in your combination. If you want more, well, you can't really combine to get heat, but you know what I'm saying. So gas is really kind of the main one I wanted to point that out for, though. So if you want really high gas procs, and let's say you take heat and toxin, you want to always put more toxin than heat. So if you're using 2 mods, but you only need 1 dual stat, which one do you use? Well, you use the heat dual stat and you use the toxin 90-90 to make sure that you get more toxin out of it, basically. Long story short. So now status duration. I hope you guys kind of understand status. I'll go ahead and read status chance. So status chance can be a key factor in deciding your weapon of choice. Some effects are very popular, powerful responses to certain enemies. Corrosive procs are valued highly against heavily armored foes. While the damage types have generally underwhelming effects, generally magnetic, right? Because there's only like one reason you use magnetic. The chance that a proc will occur can be directly increased by mods such as rifle amplitude or status chance mods. One can also increase the number of projectiles, which is, multi-shot. This effectively increases the opportunities for an enemy to be procced per a given attack. It's reflected in the weapon's attributes box in the arsenal screen, but does not change the status chance for each individual hit. Another indirect way of increasing the amount of procs can be fire rate. This also doesn't change the likelihood that a proc will occur per hit, but increases the number of possible procs in a given time frame. Pretty self-explanatory. When you're looking at this little chart right here, keep in mind this is per projectile. If you have it kind of factors in multi-shot in here. But the best way I like to look at it personally, yeah, I'm changing stuff or whatever, but the way I like to look at it, let's just do that. So the way I like to look at it personally is I take whatever my status chance is before my multi-shot, and that is the true status chance of what I am about to throw at the enemy, right? So I have 1 or 2, I got 2 multi-shots on here. Oh, and I got 1, okay. So let's take this off. So every single little Pox projectile that I have has a 56% status chance. Now, after you do some magical math and whatnot, what you'll be looking at is a 90% status chance, right? So this is the magical math between multi-shot that the game is trying to calculate for us. It doesn't mean that you have a 90% status chance. What it means is that because you have a chance to fire. What it means is because I have a chance to fire. What is this? 100. I got 180% multi-shot. So because I have because my status chance, because my it's a probability math equation. You kind of get it though, right? There's okay. So I'm gonna throw 2 guaranteed, but there's a chance I could throw a third one, right? And then each one is gonna have a 50% chance. So if I throw 2, then technically it's 50%, and then another 50%, which is like 75%. But then I could throw a third one. So let's kind of throw another third one in there. So that's an extra 12 points and all of that, right? So that's how it's getting to 90%, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. Status duration. It doesn't reflect fire rate, by the way. So if I up my fire rate, that doesn't change, just to give you a heads up. But don't go off this number all the time. You can. It's really up to you. For status duration, most statuses have a duration over which their effects apply to the target aside from corrosive. Corrosive, as you guys know, doesn't work on status duration. And some of them even deal damage over time. The ones that deal damage over time, these are the ones that's going to use status duration, such as slash, such as heat, such as toxin, even anything that has a time applied to it or a duration applied to it. All those are going to be, you're going to be able to affect all those with status duration mods. Is this useful? Absolutely, in some cases though. So let's say, for example, I had status duration on the Thibodeau or Cronin or just anything with, I have to do a different video on that. But if you have status duration on a very, very, very high guaranteed procs type slash weapon that can apply like hundreds of slash procs, Not that you can apply hundreds of slash procs, but let's just say you can, right? If it does actually take a long time to kill that enemy, and you're able to put a lot of procs on it, like we all know the infamous Exo Goxack officer, right? So like she takes a long time, but she can be affected by procs. If you want to kill her without really touching her, you can go up and you can add some status duration mods and then just apply a billion slash procs and then walk away. Right? And then she'll just die purely from slash procs. For slowing effects and speeding up effects, yeah, they're both the exact same equation. If you want to get the equation, you can check out the wiki. I don't think you really need the equation. Just know that if you're slowing the enemy or speeding up the enemy, they effectively use the same mods. It's just they calculate different. That's all. They're just complicating it, basically. Negative duration effects. So, negative duration effects. Okay. We'll get into that later. Damage distribution. Damage procs will, okay, this is the thing I was talking about. So, damage distribution. So, damage procs will occur in proportion to the amount of base damage dealt by each of the present damage types on the weapon. For example, amount of strong's highest physical damage type is impact, thus it inflicts mostly knockback procs. When both physical and elemental damage types are present on a weapon, such as a base physical damage weapon with an elemental mod equipped, physical damage types are weighted 4 times as much as elemental types in the proc calculation, making elemental procs relatively rare. What this means is, let's say you have a 4. Let's say we got the Super Vandal. Why not? Let's say we got the Super Vandal. When you are looking at this, I have 241 corrosive. I have 151 puncture. If puncture, because that's the highest of the IPS, right? In fact, puncture slash. If puncture times 4 is greater than corrosive times 1, then I'm going to proc puncture before I proc corrosive, or it has a higher likelihood, right? Those first 3 times 4, basically, if any of those times 4 are greater than, those are going to proc before the elemental. This right here is why people get negative impact on their weapons. Now, from reading what we saw, or what I read earlier with IPS, I'm not entirely sure why somebody would necessarily want negative impact. I mean, it depends on the weapon. In this weapon's case, maybe negative impact because it's the smallest IPS, right? But let's say it's something like the boar, then you might not want negative impact because that's where all the damage is coming from. But not just that, you're losing the CC from the weapon when you get rid of negative impact. Unless you have something like radiation or heat or something else that can do some kind of CC. So choice is yours, do as you wish. But just want to kind of throw that out there. That's basically what damage distribution is. To determine the proportional chance for each of the damage type to proc, multiply each physical damage type, if any, by 4 to get the proportional damage and add them together. Next, add to this the damage for each elemental damage type, if any, to get the total proportional damage. Then take each of the previous proportional damage type amounts and divide the total proportional damage to get the proc chance for each. So the equation for this is your total proportional damage, right, equals your impact, your whole IPS times 4 plus your elemental plus elemental plus elemental, so on and so forth, right? Your proportional proc chance is your proportional damage plus your proportional total damage, right? For example, if a weapon's damage is composed of 20 impact, 5 puncture, 10 slash, right? That's 35 IPS. And then you got 25 heat and 50 corrosive, which is 55 elemental. Well, keep in mind that's 35 IPS, right? Then its total proportional damage is the IPS times 4 plus the 25 plus the 50. So the total proportional damage is 215. That's proportional damage, not your damage you're going to be outputting, but your proportional damage. Therefore, the chance that an individual damage type proc will be, you're going to basically hit, you got a 37% chance to proc impact, you got a 9% chance to proc proctor, you got an 18% chance to proc slash, 11 for heat, 23 for corrosive. All right. For multi-shot, right? I'm going to just skip down to individual pellets. So I guess I'll go ahead and say it. So when firing multiple pellets in a single attack, the status chance on a listed weapon in the arsenal is actually the calculated probability that at least one of the pellets will proc. This is why I was talking about when you add a multi-shot mod, it's trying to calculate based on the probability that another bullet will basically pop out the side. That's basically what it's talking about. I'm gonna just kind of skip over that, to be honest with you. I think for the most part, though, that does cover it. But just in case somebody is wondering about multi-shot, I'll just go ahead and kind of throw out the technical stuff out there. So to calculate the status chance of a single pellet, the following formula is this. So the chance per pellet is 1 minus, now this is in parentheses, you have 1 minus your status chance to the power of 1 divided by your pellet count. You take that number and then you minus that from the number 1. And that is basically going to be your chance per pellet. And that's how they come up with your status chance based on multi-shot. Right? So status chance is status chance of the weapon listed in the arsenal. The pellet count refers to the amount of pellets fired per shot. Yeah. So based on the above equation, it is observable that when the status chance reaches 100%, the chance per pellet also will be 100%, as well as it can be observed that that small decreases in status chance from 100 will result in significant decreases in per pellet status chance. So this is changing. This part right here, this is changing. So what's going to happen is the equation effectively is going to kind of be the same, but it's not going to consider that it's going to flip around a little bit. So when you hit 100% status, because you can go over 100% status, right? It's going to be different from shotguns. And the reason why is because shotguns are divided into per pellet. Now, if for some ungodly reason you are able to actually get 100% status per pellet, which is going to be like a 500 to 800% status chance, sure, you'll have a 100% status on every pellet. But that's we'll be looking into that in the future. But I hope that pretty much wraps up status procs, right? Status procs do not inflict damage themselves. Instead, they do damage over time, or they do like a kind of passive damage. Think of it kind of like passive income, but instead of income, it's damage to an enemy in a video game. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, that's basically what that is for the most part. So, for any questions, feel free to leave your questions below. If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I wish I had little charts and all that. You'll be seeing probably, I'm not even gonna lie to you. It's probably you guys just, I don't know. I'm gonna have to find a way to do this on like my computer or something like that. Start doing all that type of stuff. But I figure if you guys are kind of, if you've been playing for a little bit, you kind of get it. You know what I'm saying? You kind of get it for the most part. Just kind of tinker around, kid you not, you figure it out. If you want a lot more, if you want a more visual representation of it, there's a guy named Satmatic on YouTube. Definitely check out his videos for combined elementals and everything. But what this information I just gave you is straight from the wiki. So, yep. That's Warframe Wiki Wednesday. This is CS from DWP, and I'll be checking you guys out in the next piece of content. All right, love you guys, and peace out at 5,000. Woo!